Hey everybody, welcome back. So in this section, we're going to take a look at some reverbs and delays and show you kind of the some of the plugins that I use and kind of talk a little bit about how I use them and maybe some different types of reverbs and delays that you may want to check out and demo. So when we talk about reverbs and delays and we talk about third-party plugins in general, people ask me all the time, if I'm just getting into these analog style plugins and I haven't bought anything yet, where do I get the most bang for the buck? And although we like to talk about tape machines and console emulations and those sorts of things, those are all great and I still highly recommend them, like I said in my previous sections. But where the biggest difference that I hear sonically between stock plugins and third-party plugins, good third-party plugins, a lot of it is in the reverbs and delays. The reverbs and delays in the stock and plugins, for the most part, I don't find to be all that great. They're okay. They work. There's nothing wrong with them. But I find that when you're using, especially reverbs, on things like vocals and guitars and pianos where you just want to create some space and you don't want it to sound too washy. With stock plugins, typically the reverb always sounds like it's there. In other words, the track always sounds like it's processed. It doesn't sound very natural. Now you can open up your stock plugin depending on what DAW you're using and you can tweak it to death and probably get it to sound acceptable. I mean, I've done that before and it does work. But what I find is that when you take a big jump up in quality of sound, is usually when you go to some third-party plugins and look at some reverbs and delays. So what I want to show you in this section is just a couple of my favorites. Now I'm going to tell you right up front that most of them are universal audio. I don't have any waves, reverbs and delays, although I do have a couple of Slate digital plugins I want to show you as well. That's a more affordable option. Now again, depending on when you're watching this video, there are tons of manufacturers out there that create lots of different reverbs and delays. And again, like I've said in the other sections, what you need to do is go out to these websites and demo these plugins, okay? If you have a universal audio system, you can still demo the plugins for 14 days for free and try them out for yourself. But let me show you what I kind of use. So the first one I want to show you that I use on drums quite a bit. And we're going to listen to drums first here just because why not? And this is a universal audio plugin that I really, really like. And I'm going to show you this one here. This one is by Universal Audio called Ocean Way Studios. Now this plugin is an expensive plugin. I'm not going to lie to you. I think at the recording of this video, it's about $350 US dollars. When they put it on sale a couple of times throughout the year, you can normally get it for a couple of hundred, $225, something like that. Now, although I'm calling this a reverb, and they call it a reverb as well, it really isn't a reverb in the traditional sense, meaning that what Universal Audio did with this plugin is they went to the famous Ocean Way Studios out in California, and they actually modeled the sound of the live rooms, okay, to create this reverb. So if you take a look at this plugin, again, we're not going to walk through every little nuance of the plugin and show you every little feature of it, but I want to show you how I use it because I use this on drums an awful lot because especially when you have software drums that are really dry, it gives it that live room sound without sounding like it has a reverb plugin on it. So what they did, Universal Audio, as you can see at the top here, it says Ocean Way Studios, and then we have Studio A and Studio B, and underneath that you have kind of a graphic of the size of the actual room. So in Studio A of Ocean Way Studios, this was a 46-foot by 52-foot room. Okay, and this is kind of the way the actual studio is laid out. There's a big live room here, there's a loft over here as well, and then there's another room over here, maybe an isolation room of some kind. Okay, and near that and next to the studio itself, you also have a bunch of presets. This is the source, and you can see it says drums 1. If I go to drums 2, you can see that they move the position of the drums in the room. So in other words, for drums, they'll put the drum kit in this top left-hand corner of the room, and they'll actually model the sound of the drums in that particular place in that particular room, which is going to sound slightly different than if you move the drum kit to the middle of the room and they modeled the room. The sound of the drums is going to sound a little different, and that's what's special about this plugin because they're really modeling the room. You're not just putting a generic reverb on it. Okay, and there's all different kinds of presets. If you were doing strings, let's say, you can see how there's like a kind of a string orchestra here with a set of microphones here, and we'll talk about the microphones in a second. They also have horns, and a piano, and you can see most of the pianos over here in the corner. A vocal group or a choir, which is similar to the strings. Vocal solo of a vocalist was singing. This is where they kind of position in the room. Guitars, like an acoustic guitar player, and then we have a guitar cabinet here and another guitar cabinet here as well. So this is Studio A. Now if we were to move over to Studio B, you'll see the room changes. And this is the side, this is Studio B, where Studio B has an 18-foot by 45-foot room, okay? So it's a lot longer than it is wider. And then there's a 36 by 46 room here, and then there's a loft here as well. And if we go over to, say, drums, which is what we're looking at, you can see when they modeled drums 1, the drums are in the top, in the right-hand corner of the room. And drums 2 is in the middle of the room, okay? And they sound slightly different from each other. So what makes it really easy and simple to use is you pick Studio A or Studio B, pick one of the drum presets, as we're going to look at, and we're going to show you how that kind of works. Next to that over here on the right, we have our faders here with our microphones here. So as I pick a preset, as you can see right here next to the drum graphic, there's this little graphic here, and that represents the microphones. Okay, and if you look over here to the right, you can see that there are 3 microphones here, a near, a mid, and a far set of microphones. 2 of those are muted in this particular preset, but we can unmute them like this. And you can see we have a far set of mics, a mid set of mics, and a near close set of mics to the drum kit. And you can balance them by using these faders here. Okay, so you can have up to 3, 1, 2, or 3 sets of microphones modeled here. You can also change the distance between the microphones themselves and the microphone to the source, in this case the drums, by coming up here. So if I move this, you can see the graphic starts to move. The near is getting further. You can see I just moved it 10.7 feet away from the drum kit. If I bring it in closer, you can see that the near mics move closer to the drum kit. Same thing with the far mics. If I want to push it back and get a real big room sound, I can do that by moving it this way. You can't click on the graphic and do it. You have to do it with the dials. And the same thing with the near. So what I try to do typically is I will try to make them kind of equal distance apart from each other, so they're not right on top of each other, because that kind of defeats the purpose. And then you can blend them together with the faders. And you can also blend the panning if you wanted, let's say the far mics, you wanted, you know, to one side or the other, or you can leave them up the middle. Okay, you could turn them on and off by muting them. If you just want to hear 1 mic, 2 mics, or all 3 mics. You could put a high pass or a low pass filter, and you can flip the phase on them as well. Okay, and again, here's the distance. At the top here are the different types of microphones that you have to choose from. So for example, we have a C112 here on the near. If I just click on this, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of mics. We can go to a C12, a C12A, which is a large diaphragm condenser. Okay, we could do that. And the same thing with the mid mics. You can change the mid mics to different microphones. Okay, so this gives you a lot of tonal options for what you want to do. And the same thing here on the far mics. There's even more choices. You can have like a U67, you can have a U670, you can have an M50, whatever you want to do, which is really cool. So, you know, the easiest way to do it is just, again, pick your studio, pick a preset, and you can kind of go to town. Okay, over here in the mode section, now this plugin has 2 modes. Now we're using it in what's called the reverb mode, which is set up just like a traditional reverb. You put it on a bus or an effects channel, and you send your drums or your instrumentation to it, just like you would with any other delay or reverb. But there's also this mode called a remic mode. And what this does, when you put it in remic mode, you're actually using it on the insert channel, on the insert of that particular channel, and it will emulate what that source was recorded like with these high-end microphones in this room. So for example, if you wanted to have your snare sound like it was recorded in this room, you can put this on your snare track as an insert, the last insert in your chain after all your other processing, choose the remic mode, and then you can choose your different microphones again to get your snare sound. Okay, so it sounds like, and it emulates that the snare was actually recorded in the room. Follow? As opposed to using it as a reverb. I don't really use it in remic mode, to be completely honest. I do that sometimes with acoustic guitar, but typically I just use it as a reverb, especially when I'm doing drums. Okay, that's the best way I feel to do it. So that's how I always do it in reverb mode as opposed to remic mode. And again, you can just click these here like this, and you can see again, as I'm clicking through the microphones, the display is changing. So the C12, the C means close, and then you can have it centered, where you can have a KM54, and you can see there it's a stereo pair. So you can see how that kind of works. Okay, so that's basically how this kind of works. Okay. And then again, you have your, over here, you'll have a pre-delay that you can set the pre-delay if you choose to for the reverb. You could bypass it here. You can do the left-right swap. You could put it in mono. We're on a stereo track right now. You can make wet dry. I usually keep it on 100% wet, but you can also mix in the dry signal if you want to, and then you have your master fader. So and then down here, we have a master EQ section as well, okay, that we can do for the reverb. Okay, this is the positioning. We can look at the EQ. If we wanted to turn, we can, how does this work here? EQ is in. I believe you can do it right here, right? No, let me see here. Oh, there we go. So you could turn up, you could set your frequency, and then you can turn your gain up and down if you wanted to put a shelf and you wanted to brighten the reverb, or if you wanted to lower the reverb, the brightness, I mean. Same thing with the low frequency. You can do this, and you can kind of give it a low end bump or a low end cut. Okay, so that's what you can kind of do here. And we'll just put that flat as we can get. Okay, and then you can take the master EQ in and out. Okay, you have an interior which kind of shows you the room that we're modeling here. So here is the actual Studio B in live room here. Okay, and if I go to Studio A, that image should change, and there is Studio A. Okay, and then you have some information about the plugin and how it kind of works. Okay, so we're in Studio A. We're going to do drums 1 just for the heck of it. We'll use all 3 microphones. We'll blend them together. So what I do is I put this, as you can see here, down here, I made a drum room reverb. I put it as the first chain, the first plugin in the chain. And now what I'm going to do, let me close this for a second. We're going to send all of our drums via the send to that reverb, okay, which is pretty standard, what you would normally do. So we're going to come over here. We're going to go to drum room. We're going to go pre-fader, and the reason why we're going to do pre-fader, if you don't know, is because we don't want the fader here, the output fader, affecting the send level going to that reverb. If you put this post-fader, what this is going to mean is every time you change this fader, the signal is going to be affected, and we don't want to do that. So pre-fader, and we're going to use this little pre-send, the pre-fader send level. How much signal do we want going to the reverb or the room? So in this case, I just kind of put it to 0 dB, okay? And then sometimes what I'll do is maybe I'll back off things like the kick drum that I don't want it to be too pronounced. And then I'm going to do the same thing all across. Let me just shut this off here, quit, okay. All across here. In PreSonus Studio One, you could just left click and drag it, and it will give you the same settings on all of them, okay? So I put all the drums to that. The only one that I usually will leave out is the room mics themselves, because the room is already capturing the room. You follow? I don't want to send a room reverb to another room reverb. And I normally will keep the rooms kind of, you know, laid back in the mix a little bit, unless I'm looking for a huge sound. In this song, I'm not looking for that huge sound. Okay, and now everything is being sent to the drums, drum reverb. We're going to make sure, we're going to lower this down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play back these drums. And we're just going to creep this up, and you're going to tend to hear it. Now, again, you need to be listening to this on a good set of stereo headphones, studio headphones or monitors. And I'll exaggerate it. You'll hear how it gets really boomy and kind of nasty sounding, so you can hear it, and then we'll back it off. So here we go. So we'll just start to creep it up. Okay, you can hear the room there, right? So now if I open up the plugin, and now we can play, and again, we've exaggerated this. I normally don't keep it this obvious, but I want you to hear the example. Now we can play with the microphones. We can mute microphones. We can blend the volumes in. So let's just play around with this a little bit so you just get the idea. Okay, so I just kind of get the blend between my 3 microphones that I want. And again, you can play around with this all you want. Make sure we're in reverb mode. And now I just kind of creep this into taste. Okay, so you can hear there how it's just very subtle. So what I'm trying to do with this particular reverb is I don't want it to sound like there's reverb on it. I just want to bring a little bit of the room to give the drums a little bit more thickness because these are software drums. So they sound very dry. So as I'm muting this, you'll hear that that the drum, listen to the snare in particular, how the snare tends to go away a little bit when I get rid of the reverb. Okay, so now once I get it set to kind of a small room here, again, hopefully you can hear that. What I do is I bring the rest of the band in, and I'll bring the rest of the band in and I'll set the final level kind of with that. Again, I just want to hear it and then I want to back it off a little, and that gives the drums a sense of space. It gets it a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker sounding, but it doesn't sound like you put a reverb on it. It sounds natural, and that's what I love about the Ocean Way Studios, is because you can really make this thing sound natural. Here I muted the mid mics and just using the near and the far mics just to get a feel for, you know, what they sound, what they sound like. And again, you can always play around with the different microphones. If we have the far mics on a split pair, you can kind of see that. I tweak the pre-delay a little bit. There's a lot of tweakability here. But again, I'll say it again, I'm going for a feel of the drums sounding a little bit bigger than they really are. I don't want it to sound like there's reverb, and I don't want the listener to even know that anything was even put on it. You shouldn't be able to hear the reverb. It should just feel like the drums were recorded in a little bit more of a higher end room, and that's what this plugin does. So what I'll do is I'll start to bring the rest of the band in and I'll blend it in. I'll bring in the bass, the guitars, and the piano here, and here we go. Okay, so hopefully you can hear the difference here. Again, it's pretty subtle, but it does. The snare gets a little bit fatter, the kick gets a little bit more punchy, and it just sounds like the drums are recorded in a bigger space. That's the whole point of that. So that's one of my favorite reverbs to use, is the Ocean Way Studio. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you another one. If you don't have Universal Audio, the other one that I found that is really, really good is the new reverb, or the Verb Suites Classic by Slate Digital. This is a great reverb, and I use this a lot. And again, this is part of, you could buy this separately from Slate Digital, or you also can choose one of their bundle packages. And I always recommend to people the Everything Bundle. For like $12 a month, you have access to all their plugins. I've said that throughout this series, and I'll say it again because it's worth mentioning. And this is a great, great alternative to that. This is one of those reverbs, again, where it sounds really natural and lush and doesn't sound kind of robotic and choppy and kind of hollow, like a lot of reverbs can sound, especially stock plugins. Again, so for the drums, I love one, and they have a lot of great presets, Slate Digital. That's the other thing that I love about this plugin. The presets are super, super usable. So here, I love this one called Warm Drum Space. Again, it's a digital reverb. It's the units. The FG250 is what they modeled. You can tweak the decay here, how long you want the reverb to last. Attack, pre-delay. You can have some chorusing. You can adjust the width. You have a wet dry knob over here on the right. You can adjust the input gain, and you have an EQ section over here, similar to the Ocean Way. So again, same thing. Let's listen to what this sounds like. So instantly you can hear how much more obvious that is with the volume at the level at the same as it was on the Ocean Way. The Ocean Way is much more subtle. This is a lot more obvious, so I would back this off quite a bit and tweak it in. Okay, so that's a completely different sounding reverb. And again, I can adjust the decay so it doesn't sound so obvious. You can also, if the snare, and usually it's where I'm listening for is really the snare. If the snare seems like to be dominating it, you can always come over to your send on your snare and you can just dial this back a little, maybe a couple of dB. Okay, so again, really natural sounding, really nice. You can pick a preset, you can tweak it from there. You can see the presets are set up by instrument type, and I've used a lot of these and they work really, really well. But again, in this example, I'm just using it as an overall kind of a drum, fattener, so to speak, as opposed to putting them on individual tracks throughout the mix, which you can do. If you just wanted your snare to have reverb, you can put it on as an insert, or you can also just send it up as a send and only set it up as a send and only send your snare, for example, to your drum reverb. And again, I always will set the final level with the rest of the mix playing. And again, in this case, I'm trying to do something very, very subtle. Okay, so that is the reverb, the Verb Suite Classics by Slate Digital. So that's what I do on drums. Now, when we talk about things like vocals, let's get over to the vocal tracks here. We'll mute up everything else for a second. There's a few different reverbs, and I'm going to show you some delays, a delay that I use as well. Let me just, having clicking issues today. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's just listen to a lead vocal here for a second.
Hey, you say I hang out with boys too much.
Okay, so that's a dry vocal. Okay, so let's take a look at some reverbs first. So over here, I have a few different reverbs that I like, and again, they're all Universal Audio, unfortunately. Now, I know Waves make some reverbs too. I don't own any of the Waves reverbs, but the first one I'm going to show you by Universal Audio is an old classic called Dreamverb. This is a really nice reverb. I use this a lot for halls, if I'm looking for like a hall reverb. And what I try to do with vocals, which I'll show you in a second, I kind of use a delay and then 3 short reverbs, a room, a plate, and a hall to kind of give it that nice full sound, without sounding too washy. So this is just Dreamverb, and again, I'll put it on a preset. Did I do on a preset? Oh, I have to set it up that way. Hold on. I got to bring this over to the lead vocal bus. Here we go. So what I like to do is I like to set up my vocals with a delay and then 3 reverbs. So I have a reverb here. Let me add 2 more bus channels here. I use bus channels for my effects channels just because you have the sends and you can send your effects somewhere if you choose to, where you can't do that with an effects channel. So I'm going to do, this is going to be my vocal hall. Okay, this is going to be my vocal plate. And this is going to be my vocal room. Okay, so I'll usually go delay into a room, into a plate, into a hall. Okay, so for my vocal room, what I like to use is let me set these up to the lead vocal bus. Sorry about that, guys. You should be more prepared, Dave, right? Okay, so we're going to turn these down all the way for now, and we're going to solo safe these as well. Click, click. Okay, save. So for my vocal room, you can, again, we showed you Dreamverb. What else I like to use for a vocal room? I didn't put it on here. One of the ones that I really like to use is the RealVerb Pro, again, by Universal Audio. Let me just find that down here. Come on. Here we go. Okay, here is the RealVerb Pro by Universal Audio. Again, this is an older plugin, and I like to set this up for like a small room, and you can see there's a ton of presets here. And what I like to do first is I want to just get a little bit of a room sound, and I'll show you how I kind of set this up. Let's just find a room, and again, room, small, you can say small, bright room. Okay, so I always want to keep my mix on 100% wet. I'm going to leave everything else kind of the same right now. In this plugin, you can do all kinds of things. You could change the different types of materials in the room. You can have, a wooden hardwood floor, or kind of a padding type of a floor. You can have the different shapes and sizes of the room. And again, if you have Universal Audio, go demo the plugin. You can read the manual on how to use all of that stuff. But basically, I pick a preset. I put it to 100% wet. And the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send our lead vocal to that room. So I'm going to call vocal room, again, pre-fader, and I'm going to put the level at 0 dB, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this vocal to that reverb.
But your friends can't help but comment. You find it hard to be the man you used to.
Okay, you can hear it's just a room, right? Pretty straightforward. So what I like to do is I like to set it up so, again, I can barely hear it, and then I back it off.
You can't stand, I smoke and drink, and that I'm not what you may think. You're sorry I don't wear stilettos.
Okay, barely there. Then I like to send that vocal to a second reverb, and I use a plate reverb. And for my plate reverb, there's a bunch of them that I can use. The other one I want to show you by Universal Audio is a couple of plate reverbs I really like. The UAD EMT 140 is an excellent plate reverb. Very natural sounding, gives it a nice warm plate sound. And again, there's all kinds of I got to set this up so I got to turn it on first. That would be helpful. There's all kinds of nice plates here. Okay, you can do all kinds of different types of plates based on presets, or you can tweak your own presets. So again, if I wanted to say polished plate, for example, down here, I'm going to turn it up to 100% wet. I'm going to leave the pre-delay at the preset. You have an EQ section here that you can use. And let me just give you an example of what this kind of sounds like. So now I'm going to send my vocal to that plate. And again, I'm going to go pre-fader. going to bring it over to 0 dB level, like I did with the room. And now I'm going to tweak in the plate.
I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't up.
Be nice if I put the plate on the right track, right? Here we go. Sorry about that.
Won't approve me. You say I hang out with boys too much.
There's the plate. Now keep in mind that the room is now being enhanced by the plate reverb because we're going into the room, then the room is going into the plate, the vocal's going into the plate. So we're doubling up on the reverb, so we want to use very small amounts.
Much your friends can't help but comment. You find it hard to be the man you used to. You can't stand, I smoke and drink, and that I'm not what you may think.
Okay, so it gets a little bit bigger, but it's still not a lot of reverb. Now again, I'm doing this in solo. I would normally be doing this in the context of the mix, and I'll show you that in a few minutes, but I want you to hear the examples. Now lastly, I'll go to a hall reverb after that. Okay, so my hall reverb, again, there's a few that we can use. I use the Universal Audio Dreamverb, but there's also plugins like the Lexicon 224, which is a Universal Audio plugin, which again is a fantastic plugin, again, with a bunch of, a bunch of great presets that you can check out for all different instrumentation. This is a great plugin. And I also use Pure Plate, which is really good. This is new by Universal Audio. As opposed to maybe using the EMT 140 on the plate, you can also use the Pure Plate. The Pure Plate sounds really, really nice as well. We'll show you that in a second. But for the hall reverb, I go back to the old tried and true, the Dreamverb. Really love the way this sounds. I pick a preset called Rich Mellow Hall. Again, make sure we're on 100% wet. Excuse me. And again, we're now going to send this vocal to that hall. We're going to do pre-fader again. We're going to make sure our level is set to 0 dB, and we're just going to tweak in the hall.
Think you're sorry I don't wear stilettos. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me.
So now you can start to hear how the vocal, the reverb just gets nice and kind of lush and just kind of falls away and it sounds natural. Okay, so what I'm doing here in essence is I'm trying to balance the difference between the three different reverbs. I tend to put more room in because it's a little less obvious, and I put a little less plate than room and then a little less hall than plate.
Hey. You say I hang out with boys too much. Your friends can't help but comment. You find it hard to be the man you used to.
Real subtle. So now once I have the levels between the three that I like to use, then what I do is I'll bring in the rest of the band and I'll highlight these three, or I'll group them and I'll move them as one unit. So the relationship between the three faders stay together. And I just back it up and bring it to where I can hear it and it's really obvious, and then I back it back down a little bit. Okay, so if I bring in the rest of the band here, and I do this on lead vocals on 90% of my mixes, this is kind of how I approach the reverbs and delays. And again, having a good third-party reverb, and we'll get to delay in a second, really makes a big difference. So let's listen to this.
You can't stand, I smoke and drink, and that I'm not what you may think. You're sorry I don't wear stilettos. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me.
See how natural it sounds? You can hear the decay kind of fall away. Now the vocal's going to appear to get a little bit louder, so sometimes I'll bring the lead vocal track down a little bit to sit in the mix. Okay, so I just play with that and I balance it back and forth until I hear it the way I want to hear it. Now you could do things like go to individual reverbs and you can tweak the EQ to a degree if you want. This one doesn't really have, well, yeah, this one has it down here more or less. You can tweak the EQ to get rid of some of the highs or bring in some more highs. The thing is, you got to play with this stuff to really get it right. But once you get the presets, once you get the settings that you like, you kind of save it as a preset so you can always go back to it, which is really cool. Okay, so that's what I do. I go from room to plate to hall on lead vocals just to get the thing to sound big, but not sound like it's washy.
Sorry, I don't wear stilettos. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me. You say I hang out with boys too much. Your friends can't help but comment. You find it hard to be the man you used to. You can't stand, I smoke and drink, and then I'm not what you may think. Sorry, I don't wear stilettos. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me. You say I hang out with boys too much. Your friends can't help but come.
Okay, so you can hear it there again. So again, it's a subtle thing that I just kind of play with. I'm usually doing this towards the end of the mix. We're doing this for demonstration. When we get to the mixing part of this series, you'll see me do this again. But that's kind of how I lay these things in. So again, using those types of reverbs. Now again, we could switch out the plate reverb if we wanted to go over to say the pure plate, which is again a real nice plugin by Universal Audio. Oops, didn't want to do that. Turn this on. So if I go to a plate and then I want to pick a preset here, you always start with a preset. This is a really nice plugin. The EMT 140 we just looked at, it's an older plugin. This is kind of maybe somewhat of their update. So let's say we just want something like, this is a big we want something. Now we just pick the first vocal one. We can just go through the presets and see what we got here. They have things for snare, for drum kits. It's kind of like a vocal slap. Let's see what this kind of sounds like in comparison.
You find it hard to be the man you used to. You can't stand, I smoke and drink, and then I'm not what you may think. Sorry, I don't wear stilettos. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me. You say I hang out with boys too much. Your friends can't help but comment. You find it hard to be the man you used to.
So the plate sounds pretty similar, but it's a little bit more lush sounding to me. And again, constantly tweaking this thing. So that is kind of my reverb trick, if you will, or tip. And those are a few different reverbs you can use. And again, sorry, they're all Universal Audio. That's really all I own. Again, you could do the same kind of thing with stock plugins where you can put the same stock plugin across all three tracks and just pick a room preset, a plate preset, and a hall preset. And you can do the same kind of experiment. Do that on your own. What I find is when you use stock plugins, it sounds very hollow. It doesn't have that natural sound. It sounds like it has reverb on it, which is not what I'm really going for. Again, I said that a few times. And again, you can always check out if you have UA, the Lexicon 224. I believe there's a native, there are other companies that make this plugin as well. I want to say, I'm not really sure if you Google it though. There are other companies that make a model of this natively, so you don't need to have a Universal Audio system. But this is a great plugin as well. So those are my reverbs that I typically will use on almost every single mix. Now, when we talk about delays, again, it's the same thing. Third-party plugins tend to be better, and I only have 2 delays that I have and that I use all the time. I don't even have a Universal Audio delay. These are 2 delays that you could get, and we'll go ahead and let's let's mute the reverbs on this lead vocal. The first one I'm going to show you again is by Slate Digital called Repeater. This is a great plugin, and it's got a ton of great presets. I love the CLA eighth note delay, which is really good. This thing sounds amazing. Again, if you have the Slate Digital stuff and you have one of their bundle packages, you have this. This is a fantastic delay. One of the nicer delays I've heard. And I use this all the time now. And again, I pick presets and I tweak them. And so by sending the vocal, let's shut off all the reverbs. Well, we already muted them. Let's now send this to a delay. Again, staying with kind of the vocal theme here, I'll use the 3 reverbs and then I'll send it to a delay. Now, typically, I'll put the delay in the front. I usually go delay into reverb. Okay. Again, pre-fader. And now, right now, all the delays, all the reverbs, excuse me, are muted, and now we just have this one delay. So if I just hit playback here, and let me mute the rest of the band so you can just hear the vocal on its own. Even though, again, I would do this in the context of the.
You can't stand, I smoke and drink, and that I'm not what you may think.
Okay, there's our delay. That particular preset is a very analog-y, tapey kind of a sound. It's not bright and brittle. It's very warm. In this particular one, he has a 10 millisecond difference between the left and right to kind of get the ping pong.
You're sorry I don't wear stilettos. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me.
Okay, so nice warm delay. Now, if I run that into the reverbs, which is what I typically do, I probably should have started this with the delay. But now, so my vocal chain for effects are delay, into room, into plate, into hall. And you can see it here in the sends. And again, I just blend it to taste.
Me. You say I hang out with boys too much. Your friends can't help but comment. You find it hard to be the man you used to. You can't stand, I smoke and drink, and that I'm not what you may think.
And you can play with these different color knobs. Will give you a little bit more vibe to it. You can pan stuff. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with this. You could adjust the feedback if you want. You can, they're linked together, so you can adjust how many repeats you have. You have this kind of analog button, which will give you some, more coloration and a little bit more, different kind of an effect. And so again, I blend it into taste.
You're sorry I don't wear stilettos. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me.
Okay, so in this example now, remember now, the delay's first, so we're actually putting reverb on the delay itself. So in order for it to not sound too washy, I keep that that delay a little bit more subtle because we're enhancing that delay by hitting it with 3 reverbs. So again, the best way to do this is to do this in the context of the mix. So if I go ahead and I solo it all up, here's what we got. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me. You say I hang out with boys too much. Okay, so there's kind of the vocal effect. Now again, when I play this back, I'm going to highlight all these and I'm going to take it out. I'm going to mute them all. And when you mute them all, you're going to hear. Did I solo save these? Let's see. Solo save. Okay. So now if I were to mute all these, okay, I'm going to mute them all. Now when I mute them, try to focus in on the vocal. I'm going to keep the rest of the band playing. You're going to hear the vocal kind of fold into the middle a little bit. It gets a little flat. It gets a little more pulled in. With the reverbs and delays, it's going to give it a little bit more of an open feel, which is what it's supposed to do, but it's not going to sound like it's a lot of processing on it. Okay, so listen for that. So we're going to start with it on. I'm going to turn it off, turn it on.
Your friends can't help but comment. You find it hard to be the man you used to. You can't stand I smoke and drink, and that I'm not what you may think. You're sorry I don't wear stilettos. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me. You say I hang out with boys too much. Your friends can't help but comment. You find it hard to be the man you used to.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear the subtle differences there. Now, again, you could just play with this and dial it into taste. I'm doing things in a very, very subtle way. And this is tricky. Again, we're spending a lot of time on this, and you'll see me do this more in the mixing part of the series. But, you know, to get this balance right, and you really got to focus in and listen. I don't want to hear it. But if you want more of an effect, you would just take all these things and just jack them up a little bit, okay? So that's one of the delays that I use that I like, the Slate Digital Repeater, which is excellent. Now, another one that we can check out, and the last one I'm going to show you in this section is another great delay that I had before the repeater came out, was by Sound Toys called Echo Boy. And this is a fantastic delay as well. It has got a massive amount of presets. I mean, hundreds of them. And you can go through them all. And I tend to pick one for vocals called Vocal. And you can just see in the vocals all the different presets they have. Everything from tape echoes to classic analog delays. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And I go to this one called Studer 8 Tape, which is kind of a tape delay, which is going to be a more warm sound. It's not going to be digital where it's going to be really crispy. It's going to be more warm. The more analog sounding presets are going to tend to sound warmer. They're not going to get real spiky. Okay. Over here again, you have your mix. I'm going to put it 100% wet. We're going to do an 1/8 note delay. You have your echo time, which is your the time we're going to do 1/8 note. We have how much feedback we want to do. We have a low cut and a high cut. So if you want to cut the highs, and I'll typically try to cut the highs to kind of keep it from getting too bright, even though it's an analog one. You could tap tempo it, or you could put it at your at the setting of the session. You can use a little bit more of a swing and a groove feel to it. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff you can do here. Saturation over here. You can do the input and the output. And here's the style. This is a studio tape. So let me just show you what this kind of does. So again, I'm going to kind of just... You
can't stand I smoke and drink, and that I'm not what you may think.
Okay, so it sounds a lot warmer than the repeater. The repeater is more of a digital. If you remember, this was a digital delay we did on the repeater, which sounded great. This is an analog delay, which is why it sounds warmer and it's a little more subtle.
Sorry, I don't wear stilettos. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me.
I tend to like that a lot more. With vocals, I tend to use the Echo Boy more than I use the repeater. Not that you can't use this. There's a ton of presets. Like I said, if you click on this, there's presets everywhere, and you can do all kinds of different presets, and you can create your own presets. But when you're first starting, it's always good to use a plugin that has really good presets, like I said earlier, and this one does. We happen to pick a digital delay, but if we wanted to pick something that was a little bit more analog sounding, you can always go to like a vintage slapback delay, and that's going to sound a little bit warmer than the digital delay. But I really like the way the Echo Boy sounds. So you can see I got more delay signal coming than I did with the digital because it's more subtle.
You say I hang out with boys too much. Your friends can't help but comment. You find it hard to be the man you used to. You can't stand I smoke and drink. You're sorry I don't wear stilettos. I drink beer at your fancy parties. Your family most likely won't approve me. You say I hang out with boys too much. Your friends can't help but comment. You find it hard to be the man you used to.
Okay, so there is my reverb delay trick for vocals. And again, some of the reverbs and delays that I use. Again, in summary, the two delays that I use a lot are the Slate Digital Repeater, which I really like. Again, ton of presets, ton of tweakability, sounds really good. And then probably my favorite, if not one of my favorites, is the Sound Toys Echo Boy. I use this on vocals all the time. I really love this plugin. Again, you could demo both these plugins for free. As far as reverbs go, for me, I have all Universal Audio stuff, but I know there's other companies that make other reverbs. You may want to check them out. But again, if you really, although we did talk about the Verb Suite Classics by Slate Digital, which is fantastic. And that's how I use it on drums. And then we also took a look at the Ocean Way Studios. Okay, so that is the reverb and the delays and kind of a few uses. Again, you'll see this more in depth when we go to the mixing series. I just wanted to give you an introduction to them. And again, I urge you to go out and demo these things and compare them to your stock plugins, okay? To keep this series somewhat moving, I don't want to spend too much time comparing them back and forth. You really need to do that because the way to use these analog plugins is you got to play with them. By me just showing you is not going to get you good at it. You have to get some of these analog plugins, demo them, compare them to your stock plugins, and go back and forth. And I think what you're going to find is, and what I find is that the third-party plugins, when you talk about reverbs and delays, is usually a quantum leap better than the stock plugins. And that's why I recommend you have at least one really good reverb, something like the Verb Suite Classics that you can use on a host of different instruments, or something different, or any of the Universal Audio ones, and also a really good delay. And again, something like Repeater and Echo Boy have a million presets in them. They're highly tweakable. You can get a digital delay sound, a vintage delay sound, and it'll cover all your delay needs. So you don't have to have a ton of plugins for reverbs and delays. You just have a couple of really good ones, and that'll do the trick. So come on back for the next section, and we're going to start now jumping into this mix and actually mix this song in real time for real. So come back for the next section, and we will start that.